The darkness of space had never looked so terrifying. Across 3 entire star systems, the Valerian Empire's war fleet spread out like a disease. 500,000 massive warships floated in perfect rows, each one the size of a small city. Their black metal hulls were covered with enough weapons to turn entire planets into dust and rocks. This was not just a fleet. This was the end of worlds made real. Admiral Thexnor stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking out at the greatest military force the galaxy had ever seen. His alien features twisted into what humans might call a smile, but it was cold and cruel. He had conquered 47 different species across the galaxy. Some had fought back with courage. Others had begged for mercy. All had fallen in the end. These humans would be no different. The Admiral had studied the intelligence reports about Earth, a single planet with primitive technology. Their fastest ships took months to travel between star systems while his fleet could cross the galaxy in days. Their weapons were chemical explosives and simple energy beams. Their defenses were nothing more than metal plates and basic force fields. It would be over in hours, maybe less. But Thexnor was thorough. He had brought enough firepower to destroy 1,000 Earths. The humans would see his fleet approaching and know that resistance was hopeless. They would surrender without a fight, and he would add another species to the Empire's collection of slaves. Far away, in a secret military base hidden in the asteroid belt around Earth, Captain Li Huan was having the worst day of his life. The briefing room was small and cramped, filled with the nervous energy of people who knew they were about to die. Holographic displays showed the approaching alien fleet, a red mass of dots so large it covered half the screen. Li Huan was 34 years old, the youngest captain in Earth's Space Navy. He had earned his rank through skill and determination, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. The weight of every human life pressed down on his shoulders like a mountain. His hands shook slightly as he reviewed the mission parameters one final time. The UES Defiant sat in the hangar bay, looking almost pathetic next to the massive alien ships on the display screens. It was sleek and white, built for speed rather than heavy combat. Most of Earth's politicians had wanted to build bigger ships, more guns, thicker armor. But the scientists had convinced them to try something different, something that had never been attempted before. Chief Engineer Park Sue walked into the briefing room, her face grave but determined. She was the smartest person Li Huan had ever met, with 3 doctorate degrees and a mind that could solve problems others couldn't even understand. For the past 5 years, she had worked 18-hour days developing technology that existed only in theory. Now they would find out if theory could save the human race. The phase shift drive was her masterpiece. It allowed a ship to exist partially outside normal space, moving between dimensions like a ghost. Traditional weapons couldn't hit what wasn't entirely there, and the ship could appear anywhere instantly. But it had never been tested in real combat, and the energy requirements were enormous. One mistake could tear the ship apart or strand them forever in empty space between realities. Lieutenant Kim Yuna was already at her station when the crew assembled. At 28, she was the best tactical officer Earth had ever produced. She could calculate weapon trajectories and enemy movements in her head faster than most computers. Her job was to find the aliens' weaknesses and exploit them before they could adapt. The problem was that nobody knew what those weaknesses might be. Communications Officer Choi Min established the final connection with Earth Command. His voice was steady despite the fear in his eyes. The message was simple. Earth's governments had agreed to surrender if the mission failed. There would be no second chances, no backup plans. Everything depended on 47 people in one experimental ship. The crew members said their goodbyes to families they might never see again. Some wrote letters. Others prayed to whatever gods they believed in. A few simply sat in silence, preparing their minds for what was coming. They were ordinary people facing an impossible situation, but they were humanity's only hope. As the alien fleet drew closer to Earth's solar system, both sides prepared for what they believed would be a simple victory. Admiral Thexnor expected easy conquest. Captain Li Huan planned desperate survival. Neither understood that they were about to witness something that would change the galaxy forever. The greatest battle in human history was about to begin, and nobody knew how it would end. The moment had arrived. Captain Li Huan took a deep breath and nodded to his crew. "Initiate phase shift," he commanded, his voice cutting through the tension on the bridge like a knife. The Defiant's experimental engines hummed to life, reality bending around them as they prepared to do the impossible. Space itself seemed to twist and fold as the small human ship disappeared from normal existence. For a heartbeat, they existed nowhere and everywhere at once. The crew felt their stomachs drop as dimensions shifted around them. Then, with a flash of blue light, they emerged directly in the center of the Valerian fleet. Admiral Thexnor was reviewing battle plans when his tactical officer screamed in alarm. Where empty space had existed seconds before, a human ship now floated less than 1,000 meters from his flagship. The Admiral's 4 eyes widened in shock. How had they gotten past his sensors? How had they traveled so far so quickly? His questions would never be answered. "Fire all weapons," Li Huan ordered, his finger hovering over the firing controls. The bridge was dead silent except for the quiet beeping of computers and the nervous breathing of his crew. This was it. The moment that would either save humanity or doom them all. The Defiant's quantum disruptor cannons unleashed their fury. These weren't ordinary weapons that fired energy or projectiles. They shot pure disruption at the quantum level, targeting the very forces that held matter together. Park Su had spent years studying captured Valerian technology, looking for any weakness she could find. What she discovered was brilliant in its simplicity. The alien ships were connected by invisible energy networks. Their shields, their weapons, their life support systems. Everything was linked together in one massive grid. The Valerians thought this made them stronger, allowing ships to share power and coordinate attacks perfectly. They were wrong. It made them vulnerable in ways they never imagined. The first quantum burst hit a command dreadnought at exactly the right frequency. The ship's shields didn't just fail, they became conductors. Energy that should have protected the vessel instead became a pathway for destruction. The disruption spread instantly through the shield network, jumping from ship to ship like electricity through water. Park Su watched her instruments with growing amazement. "It's working," she whispered, hardly believing her own readings. "The cascade is spreading faster than I calculated. Their entire network is collapsing." The first dreadnought exploded in a ball of white fire. The explosion was so bright that the bridge crew had to shield their eyes. But that was just the beginning. The energy feedback raced through the connected ships at light speed, turning their own defensive systems into weapons of mass destruction. Lieutenant Kim Yuna stared at her tactical display in shock. Red dots representing enemy ships were disappearing by the hundreds. "Captain," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "we're reading massive explosions throughout the enemy formation. Entire battle groups are going dark." The Valerian fleet, which had seemed so mighty and unstoppable just moments before, was tearing itself apart. Ships that had survived countless battles across the galaxy were dying not from enemy fire, but from their own technology. The cascade effect was like a plague, spreading death through the alien armada with terrifying efficiency. Admiral Thexnor watched in horror as his ships exploded around him. His tactical officers were screaming reports that made no sense. How could one small human vessel be destroying his entire fleet? His flagship shuddered as the cascade effect reached his own ship's systems. Warning lights flashed red across the bridge as shields failed and power systems overloaded. "All ships disconnect from the network," he ordered desperately. But it was too late. The cascade was moving faster than his communications could reach the distant parts of his fleet. Ships thousands of kilometers away were already exploding before they could receive his warning. Communications Officer Choi Min was intercepting alien transmissions, his equipment picking up panicked voices speaking in languages he didn't understand. But he didn't need to understand the words to know what was happening. The terror in those voices was universal. "They're trying to retreat," he reported to Captain Li Huan. "But the cascade is spreading faster than they can escape." The bridge crew watched in stunned silence as thousands of alien warships died in cascading explosions. Each ship that died sent feedback through the network, killing more ships, which created more feedback, which killed even more ships. It was like watching dominoes fall, except each domino was a massive warship filled with alien soldiers. In less than 10 minutes, over 50,000 Valyrian dreadnoughts had been destroyed. The aliens' greatest strength, their interconnected technology, had become their greatest weakness. The human ship that had seemed so small and helpless was proving that sometimes the smallest key can open the largest door. The battle was far from over, but humanity had struck the first blow in a war that would reshape the galaxy forever. The Defiant had become something beyond a warship. It was, now, a force of nature, a ghost haunting the vast alien fleet. Captain Li Huan stood at the center of his bridge, watching the tactical displays with the focus of a surgeon performing a delicate operation. Every movement had to be perfect. Every shot had to count. There would be no second chances. "Phase shift to Sector 7, he ordered calmly. The ship blinked out of existence and reappeared 3,000 kilometers away, directly behind a cluster of Valyrian command vessels. The aliens' targeting systems couldn't lock onto something that wasn't entirely in their dimension. By the time they realized where the human ship had gone, it was already somewhere else. Park Sue's hands flew across her control panels, her face pale with concentration. The phase shift drive was running at 120% capacity, far beyond what the designers had intended. Warning lights flashed across her station, but she ignored them. The alternative was death for everyone on Earth. "I'm detecting structural stress in the phase coils," she reported, sweat beading on her forehead. "We can't keep this up much longer. The drive systems are starting to break down." "How much longer?" Li Huan asked, not taking his eyes off the tactical display. "Maybe 20 minutes before we risk a catastrophic failure," Park Sue replied. "But Captain, we're doing damage faster than I ever imagined possible. Their whole fleet is falling apart." She was right. What had started as precise attacks on key targets had become something far more devastating. The Valyrian fleet's interconnected network was spreading destruction like a virus through a computer system. Every ship that died sent feedback through the network, causing more ships to overload and explode, which created even more feedback in an endless cycle of destruction. Communications Officer Choi Min had his headphones pressed tight against his ears, listening to the chaos of alien communications. He didn't speak their language, but he didn't need to. The panic in their voices was clear in any language. Ship commanders were screaming orders that couldn't be followed. Engineers were reporting system failures that couldn't be fixed. Medical officers were calling for help that couldn't come. "They're trying to coordinate a response," Choi Min reported, "but their communication network is breaking down too. Every time they try to send orders, the cascade effect disrupts their signals. They can't even talk to each other anymore." Lieutenant Kim Yuna was in her element, her tactical mind working at lightning speed. She had identified the key nodes. In the Valyrian formation, the command ships that controlled entire sectors of their fleet. Each one she destroyed would cause exponential damage throughout the network. "Next target, Sector 12, she announced, highlighting a massive dreadnought on the display. "That's their primary coordination hub for the Southern Fleet. If we take it out, we'll trigger cascades in at least 40,000 ships." Li Huan nodded. "Do it." The Defiant phase shifted again, appearing directly above the target vessel. The alien ship was 3 times larger than anything humans had ever built, bristling with weapons and armor. Under normal circumstances, it would have been suicide to attack such a monster. But these weren't normal circumstances. The quantum disruptors fired again, sending waves of destructive energy into the command ship's shield matrix. The vessel's defenses, designed to withstand the firepower of entire fleets, crumbled like paper. The disruption spread through the network instantly, and Kim Yuna's prediction proved accurate. 43,000 ships died in the following cascade. Admiral Thexnor's flagship was now isolated, its connection to the fleet network severed to prevent the cascade from reaching it. He stood alone on his bridge, watching through the viewports as his mighty armada dissolved into expanding clouds of debris and fire. Ships that had conquered star systems were dying by the thousands, their hulls torn apart by their own technology. "How many ships have we lost?" he asked his tactical officer, though he dreaded the answer. 217,000 confirmed. "Destroyed," came the reply. "Another 30,000 are reporting critical systems failures. The cascade effects are still spreading through the outer formations. The Admiral's alien features went pale. In less than an hour, one small human ship had destroyed nearly half of his fleet. The species he had dismissed as primitive had just demonstrated technology that the Valerian Empire couldn't even comprehend, let alone counter. The space around the battle was now filled with debris fields that stretched for thousands of kilometers. Twisted metal, shattered hull plates, and the scattered remains of alien technology drifted in the void like a graveyard of civilizations. The light from dying ships illuminated the darkness, creating a hellish landscape of destruction. Park Sue's warnings were becoming more urgent. "Captain, we're approaching critical stress levels. The phase shift drive is starting to tear itself apart. We need to reduce power or risk losing the ship." But Li Huan knew they couldn't stop now. The Valerian fleet was broken, but not defeated. If they gave the aliens time to regroup and adapt, humanity might never get another chance like this. The impossible was happening. One human ship was destroying the greatest military force the galaxy had ever seen, and they were just getting started. The remaining Valerian ships were like wounded animals backed into a corner. Admiral Thexnor had watched his mighty fleet shrink from 500,000 vessels to barely 200,000 in less than 2 hours. The survivors were scattered across space, their formation broken, their confidence shattered. But desperate enemies are often the most dangerous. "All ships focus fire on grid coordinates 77 Alpha," Thexnor commanded through the emergency communication channels. His voice had lost its earlier confidence, replaced by the cold fury of a commander who knew he was losing everything. "Concentrate all weapons on that position. Nothing can survive the combined firepower of 200,000 dreadnoughts." The response was immediate and terrifying. Every surviving alien warship turned its weapons toward the same point in space where the Defiant had last been detected. The void lit up with energy beams, plasma bolts, and exotic weapons that could melt asteroids. The combined firepower was enough to destroy a moon, all focused on one small area of empty space. But Captain Li Huan had anticipated this desperation move. "Phase shift to Dimension 7, he ordered calmly, even as sweat dripped down his face. The stress of commanding this impossible battle was taking its toll on everyone aboard the Defiant. The human ship flickered out of normal space just as the alien weapons fire arrived. 200,000 energy beams struck nothing but vacuum, their deadly power wasted on emptiness. But the aliens had fired from all directions, surrounding the target area completely. With nowhere else for their weapons to go, the energy beams struck each other and the ships that had fired them. Lieutenant Kim Yuna watched in amazement as her tactical display lit up with explosions. "Captain, they're hitting each other," she reported, hardly believing what she was seeing. "Their own coordinated attack is destroying their own ships." The irony was brutal. In their desperation to kill one small human vessel, the Valerians had created a crossfire that tore through their own ranks. Ships that had survived the quantum cascade were now dying from friendly fire, their hulls torn apart by weapons fired by their own allies. From the safety of dimensional phase shift, the Defiant struck back. Kim Yuna had calculated the perfect firing solutions while existing partially outside normal space. The quantum disruptors could still reach into normal dimension, but the alien weapons couldn't touch them in return. It was like fighting from behind an invisible wall that only worked one way. "Target the command cluster in Sector 4, Kim Yuna announced. "If we can take out their coordination ships, they won't be able to organize any more group attacks." The Defiance weapons fired through the dimensional barrier, striking 3 Valerian command vessels simultaneously. The quantum cascade began, again spreading through the network connections that the surviving ships still maintained. More explosions bloomed across the battlefield, as the aliens' own technology continued to work against them. But something was going wrong. Park Sue stared at her instruments with growing alarm, her face pale in the blue light of the phase shift drive. "Captain, we have a serious problem," she called out, her voice tight with concern. "The quantum cascade effects are becoming unstable. They're starting to warp space-time itself." The battlefield around them was beginning to change in ways that defied understanding. Space was bending and twisting as massive amounts of energy from dying ships interacted with the quantum disruption fields. Reality itself was starting to break down under the strain of so much destruction happening so quickly. "What does that mean for us?" Li Huan asked, though he suspected he didn't want to know the answer. "It means the phase shift drive might not be able to bring us back to normal space," Park Su replied grimly. "The dimensional barriers are becoming unstable. We could be trapped between realities, or worse, we could be torn apart by the quantum fluctuations." The crew worked with desperate efficiency as their situation became more dangerous by the minute. They were winning the battle, but the cost might be their own existence. The Defiant shook and groaned as dimensional forces pulled at its hull, threatening to tear the ship apart from the inside out. Communications Officer Choi Min suddenly sat up straight at his station, his headphones crackling with intercepted, alien transmissions. "Captain, I'm picking up new communications from the Valerian fleet," he reported excitedly. "They're talking about retreat. Full retreat." The impossible was happening. The surviving Valerian commanders were finally accepting what their eyes had been telling them for hours. They couldn't win this battle. One human ship, smaller than their smallest escort vessels, had destroyed most of their fleet and was still fighting from a dimension they couldn't even reach. "Confirmed retreat signals from multiple sectors," Choi Min continued. "They're powering up their hyperspace drives. The entire fleet is preparing to run." Admiral Thexnor's voice came through the communications, his words heavy with defeat. "All ships emergency retreat to Rally Point 7. We cannot fight an enemy we cannot touch. This battle is lost. The greatest military force in galactic history was running away from 47 humans in one experimental ship." The tide of the war had turned in the most dramatic way possible, but the Defiant's crew still had to survive the dimensional chaos they had created to claim their victory. The silence that followed the Valerian retreat was more terrifying than the battle itself. Space, which had been filled with the roar of weapons and the screams of dying ships, was now eerily quiet. The surviving alien vessels, fewer than 30,000 from an original force of 500,000, disappeared into hyperspace one by one. Their retreat wasn't organized or dignified. It was pure panic, ships fleeing in every direction as fast as their damaged engines could carry them. Admiral Thexnor's flagship was among the last to leave. As his ship prepared for the jump to hyperspace, he took one final look at the battlefield that had destroyed his career and his empire's reputation. The debris field stretched across 3 star systems, a graveyard of twisted metal and shattered dreams. Nearly 500,000 of the galaxy's most advanced warships had been reduced to scrap by a single human vessel. "Record this in the fleet archives," he told his communications officer, his voice hollow with defeat. "Let the Empire know that humanity is not to be underestimated. They possess weapons we cannot understand and tactics we cannot counter." The hyperspace jump activated, and the last Valerian ship vanished from human space. They carried with them news that would shake the galaxy to its core. The primitive species from the small blue planet had just announced themselves as a major power in the most dramatic way possible. Aboard the Defiant, the crew was discovering that victory came with its own dangers. The ship was falling apart around them, its experimental systems pushed far beyond their design limits. Park Su crawled through maintenance tunnels filled with sparking cables and overheated components, trying to keep their vessel together long enough to reach home. "Phase shift drive is completely burned out," she reported to Captain Li Huan, her uniform torn and her face streaked with grease. "The quantum disruptors are offline, and we're running on emergency power only. We're lucky the ship didn't tear itself apart during that last dimensional shift." The bridge was a mess of damaged equipment and flickering displays. Half the crew stations were dark, their systems fried by the incredible energies they had channeled during the battle. But they were alive, and more importantly, Earth was safe. Lieutenant Kim Yuna was trying to make sense of the tactical data they had collected. "Captain, the debris field is going to be visible from Earth with basic telescopes," she reported. "The explosions were so massive that the light will reach our solar system within hours. Everyone on Earth will know something big happened out here." Communications Officer Choi Min was monitoring channels across known space, picking up the frantic transmissions as news of the battle spread. "Sir, I'm intercepting communications from at least 12 different alien civilizations," he said, excitedly. "They're all talking about what happened here. Word is spreading faster than the retreating Valerian ships." The political implications were staggering. For centuries, humanity had been ignored by the galactic community. Earth was considered a backwater world inhabited by a species barely advanced enough for space travel. Most alien civilizations didn't even bother to put humanity on their threat assessment charts. That had changed forever in the span of a few hours. The Valerian Empire had been one of the galaxy's major powers, their fleet considered invincible by military experts across known space. The fact that humans had destroyed it with a single ship would force every alien government to completely reevaluate their understanding of human capabilities. As the Defiant limped toward Earth on damaged engines, Captain Li Huan found himself thinking about the future. They had won this battle, but what came next? Would other alien empires try to destroy humanity before they could become an even greater threat? Would Earth be forced to build more ships like the Defiant to defend against new enemies? "Captain," Park Sue called from her engineering station, "I'm getting readings from Earth. They're sending every ship they have to escort us home. The entire defense fleet is coming out to meet us." Through the viewports, they could see the distant lights of human vessels approaching. These ships looked primitive compared to the alien technology they had just faced, but they represented something the Valerians had never understood: the determination of a species fighting for its survival. The crew of the Defiant had proven that human ingenuity could overcome impossible odds. They had shown that sometimes the smallest force, armed with the right knowledge and unlimited determination, could defeat the mightiest enemy. But they had also painted a target on Earth that would never disappear. As news of the victory reached Earth, celebrations erupted across the planet. People danced in the streets, not fully understanding what had happened, but knowing that their world had been saved. Government leaders gathered in emergency sessions, realizing that humanity's place in the galaxy had changed overnight. The age of human expansion was about to begin, but it would not be peaceful. Other alien civilizations were already making plans to either ally with or destroy this new galactic power. The crew of the Defiant had saved their world, but they had also ensured that humanity would never again be ignored by the galaxy. Captain Li Huan and his 46 crew members had written their names into history with fire and blood. They had proven that humans belonged among the stars, and they had announced that arrival in the most spectacular way possible. The galaxy would never be the same.